Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my reaction channel. My name is Teddy90. Today we're going to be reacting to Why Build Venice. It's been a little while since I've uploaded a video, it's been a little while since I streamed, and it's been a little while since I've done anything other than university and work. But university and work take all of my free time, so whatever. We're going to be reacting to the video of Why Build Venice, made by Atlas Pro. Venice, for those of you who don't know, was at one time a merchant republic, one of the most powerful merchant republics during the early medieval era and the medieval era, and even going past into the Renaissance era, and stopped being a power, I think, around 1600, 1700, because I think Austria conquered them sometime in the 1700s, and then Napoleon, and then everything else that ruined what Venice was. Venice was also a merchant republic for the longest time, which meant it was sort of a democracy. Yeah, definitely sort of a democracy. A democracy for the rich, and even then only sort of a democracy for the rich. But, yeah. Venice is a very interesting place with a very interesting history, and I also think it has a current independence movement. I'm not sure how well the Venetian independence movement is doing right now. Venetian independence. Don't yell at my spelling. I still don't know why the Yahoo always pops up with my Google thing. Yeah, there's like Venetian independence things and things like that. There is a referendum, other things else like that, yeah. But I do believe that Venice probably could function as a separate country from Italy, because Venice was a separate country from Italy pretty much forever, because Italy's a very recent country. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see them get free again, because they do have a different culture than the rest of Italy. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Also, Venice is about to flood because of global warming and rising sea water temperatures and things like that. But yeah, we'll jump into this video. I don't know how much of that they're going to fill in themselves, but that is my honestly kind of vague knowledge of Venice. So let's see what they're going to say, and let's see where my knowledge coalesces with theirs. Why build Venice? I can't remember why Venice was built. It was... I don't think it was built by escaped slaves. There was... I can't remember. It was also built on a lagoon. Let's watch the video.
Truly was an amazing city. It was clear upon arrival that I had come to a type of marvel for human achievement. Not only is this city a feat of incredible engineering, but it also managed to produce and preserve the architecture and aesthetic of an era long gone.
Yeah.
Here in the historic part of Venice, we have 55,000 people, all living on a collection of 118 islands, completely encompassed by the waters of the Venetian lagoon found at the head of the Adriatic Sea. Unfortunately, aside from rising sea levels due to climate change, the city has always had a bigger problem. It's sinking. A study conducted between the year 2000 to 2010 found the city to be sinking on average between 1 and 2 millimeters each year, which over hundreds of years can really build up. There are two main causes for the city's slow fall into the ocean, and the first one has to do with plate tectonics. You see, Venice rests atop a small tectonic plate called the Adriatic Plate, and believe it or not, this plate actually broke off from the African Plate and has been slowly smashing into the larger Eurasian Plate for the past few.
Now, isn't that strange? It's actually a smaller plate. So it's like India in that regard. What are the current plates of the world? I know India's one. I know Australia is sort of one. And I know there's a bunch in the ocean. Teutonic plates? Teutonic plates, that's the one. Not Teutonic. That's Knights of the Teutons, right? Knightly order in, I think it was northern Poland, Latvia, Lithuania area. Yeah, the Teutonic Knights. Let's see this. Anatolia, Eurasia, India. Is it? There's the... maybe, I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking for. Okay. I guess it's just like a mini plate, unlike like the Arabian or the Indian plate. It's like a mini plate. Okay, whatever. Sorry for getting distracted. So there's a mini plate underneath the Adriatic. No, go away, YouTube. There's a mini plate underneath the Adriatic, like India here, but it's smaller, so it's not. Is that what caused the Alps? The mini plate? Is that what caused the Alps going like that? Because it does seem to cover most of the area of where the Alps formed, and mountains only form when tectonic plates hit and then go up. So I wonder if that's what caused the Alps.
Million years. And as the Adriatic plate crashes into Europe, it subducts or goes beneath the Eurasian plate. It's this process that contributes to the volcanism noted across Italy, including Mount Vesuvius. But more importantly for Venice, it also causes the plate and everything sitting on top of it to slowly lose altitude. The second cause of Venice's sinking, however, has to do with the way Venice was built. You see, like I said, before the city of Venice was constructed, settlers would have arrived to find a collection of 118 or so muddy islands stuck within a swampy lagoon, which isn't the best thing to put heavy stone buildings on top of. So, in order to create sturdy foundations on which a city could be built, the islands beneath Venice were drilled full of tree trunks. Over 10 million wooden pilings were driven into the ground here, sometimes so close that they were touching.
That's insanity. Like, you would see a bunch of muddy islands and be like, you know what this needs? A city. Right? Like, it boggles the mind that people would have even bothered to attempt to set up a city here. Like, it makes no sense. It's awesome, but it makes no sense.
And despite that sounding like a horrible idea, it actually wasn't. The dirt these poles were placed in was almost completely waterlogged, meaning there was little to no oxygen here to allow for decomposition to occur. As a result, these wooden beams could be covered and built on.
Human engineering always baffles me. Like, if you look at how old the pyramids are, for example, in comparison to, like, everything else, like, they're thousands of years old in comparison to things that are already thousands of years old, right? Like, they were ancient when things we consider ancient now were just getting built. Like, I think it's the Mausoleum Herculitis or whatever it is, I can't remember the name, was created 23,000 years after. Or is it 2300 or 23,000 years after the... Not 23,000, obviously. Pyramids of Giza creation. Constructed 2580 to 2560. Mausoleum of Heraclin, blah, blah, blah. 353 and 350. So yeah, not 25,000 obviously. 2,500, yeah. It's like 2,200 years before the mausoleum was created, the pyramids of Giza were created. Or if you want something a bit more what's another? How am I blanking on this? Statue of Rhodes. Don't judge me, of Rhodes. Colossus of Rhodes. 280 BC, yeah. It's insanity. It's insanity, the difference between, like, the length of when things were ancient and when things weren't. Like, human engineering baffles me every time I attempt to learn about it.
On top of, without the threat of them rotting. This method was so effective that, to this day, many of the original wooden
25,000. God, what a fuck. Yes, I'm a bit of a dumb sometimes.
beams that Venice was constructed on remain beneath the city, supporting all of the buildings and people that came much later. But as even more buildings were constructed, as even more people came to live here, and as even more time passed, the weight put on these wooden beams sitting in no more than mud only increased. And, well, this seems pretty obvious, but if you push something down in the mud, it will sink. So, while the wooden beams supporting the city are still holding up, the muddy base of Venice is slowly giving away under the weight of millions of bricks, thousands of people, and hundreds of years. So, the longer Venice stands, the more it will sink. Now, this doesn't really happen with most cities, obviously. For the most part, when choosing a place to make a city, people typically choose places with solid soil and bedrock beneath them and in locations easy to reach on foot. And well, Venice is kind of the opposite of that, built on nothing but mud in the middle of a lagoon that for most of its history required a boat to reach. Now, sometimes people are restricted by what's available to them, but in the case of Venice, less than 4 kilometers away is mainland Europe, with all of its accommodations, such as solid ground. So then this raises the question, why did the early people who settled here choose to build on the swampy islands in the middle of the lagoon instead of, on the nearby coast that's perfectly suited to host?
This is from my very limited knowledge of early Venice, but wasn't it to get away from the Romans? I don't remember. I don't remember.
And well, the answer to this has to do with how the city got its start. Now, the city itself was officially founded in 421 CE, but people lived in this area much earlier.
Yeah, there was tribes
The
there.
name Venice originally comes from the Veneti tribe, who inhabited the lands around modern-day Venice
Thank you, Imperator Rome, for letting me know that.
in a region that is unsurprisingly known as Veneto. Before the founding of Venice, however, the region of Veneto was still a pretty populated place, with people residing in cities like the nearby Padua, as well as throughout the countryside as farmers. The Veneto region is part of what's known as the Po Valley of northern Italy, which is some of the best farmland in the entire country. And while most of the valley is guarded from outsiders by the Alps, the Veneto region lies right at the only opening to Greater Europe. So, if you were some sort of invading army that wanted to take control of the prosperous farmlands of Veneto, the Po Valley, or further, your two choices were to either cross the Alps or go through the pleasant Veneto region. So the choice was easy, at least for most invaders anyway. Because of this, the Veneto region witnessed
Making fun of Hannibal. Yeah, Hannibal. Great general. He made some interesting tactical choices, though.
many invaders marching through it over the centuries. As early as the 2nd century CE, Germanic tribes such as the Quadi and Marcomanni invaded and destroyed many of the cities within this region. Then, around the 5th century, another Germanic tribe, this time the Visigoths, invaded through Veneto, and another 50 years after that, it was the Huns, led by Attila, who marched across Veneto on their way to the rest of the Western Roman Empire. Then, finally, by 568 CE, the Lombards, another Germanic group who originated further east, migrated nearly their entire population into the Po Valley and basically replaced a lot of people already living here. The effects of this can be seen today in the name of the region Lombardy, which is where the city of Milan is to be found. As a result of all of these invasions and migrations, many Roman cities in the region were destroyed and many Roman people were forced out of their lands, creating a refugee crisis within the Veneto region. When some of these refugees fled to the coast of the Adriatic Sea, they ended up here at the Venetian lagoon. And it was this, the lagoon, not really the islands themselves, that attracted these refugees to build here. You see, in this location, these people who had all been recently inflicted by war found something that none of their other cities had: natural defenses. The islands in the middle of the Venetian lagoon were, well, just that, islands in the middle of a lagoon. A place invaders could not reach unless they had boats, which, well, they usually didn't. The same way that castles of medieval times had moats to protect them from invading armies, these islands had an entire lagoon protecting them. They didn't need to construct walls or towers to defend it, they just needed to make these islands habitable, and the fact that they were islands would do the rest. So that's what they did, driving wooden pilings into the muddy islands, creating the foundation.
My guess was wrong. So they moved there because of war. That makes sense. Yeah, the escaped slave thing was Bravos, isn't it, from Game of Thrones?
For a city.
Such a nerd.
So that explains why people built Venice, but it also explains how Venice became what it is today. You see, while the city was built by necessity, the protection provided by the lagoon
It turned itself into a trade empire, yeah. Because if you were surrounded on all sides by water, this is why you see most water-based civilizations, like people who built on the coast, or at least the most of them, either turn to raiding or trade. Generally both, but generally raiding or trade. Like the Vikings, for instance, were raiders and traders. Like, they would trade to different places. They would go around trying to find the best trade deals, and occasionally they would raid. We know more about their raiding because obviously people would write about the fact that angry northern people with long hair are raping your women. But they were also mostly just traders. They would go everywhere and just try to make money to take back home. And the merchants also acted as scouts for the later raiders. But pretty much every nation that built on the coast, or in this case, literally built on islands, turned into a trading nation. Like, that's why the UK, for instance, is a massive trade nation. Because it is just a couple of islands. Granted, the argument could be made for why didn't Japan become like Great Britain, or didn't become like a massive trade nation until recently. And the answer to that is China. If you want me to go more in depth, I can, but I think I have other videos talking about why Japan didn't become like Britain, or at least referencing the fact that Japan didn't do it, because China is terrifying, and China doesn't want anything with trade, and when that's pretty much your only neighbor except for Korea, who was frankly at that point, throughout, well, not just at that point, throughout pretty much all of human history, or at least the time that Korea and China existed as concepts and nations, Korea was China's bitch, because everyone was China's bitch. But you can't really trade with a country that just doesn't care and already has everything. So Japan was sort of forced to go inward because there was no real other way for them to do anything but that. So that's why Japan went that way. But if you look at Indonesia was a massive trade hub for the longest time. Majapahit, and I can't remember the other ones. Who else? Ceylon, or modern-day Sri Lanka, was a massive trade nation. Zanzibar in East Africa was a trade nation. It had a lot of trade colonies on the coast. The Swahili coast, as you would know them from Bill Wirtz. But yeah, Zanzibar, small island off the coast. Who else? Why am I blanking on this all of a sudden? Alright, I had another example, but my mind just went the way of the dodo. The Polynesians were more of explorers than anything else. The Greeks, those are the ones I was thinking of. Greece is basically just one giant island chain with a mainland that is pretty much just mountains. So Greece was a massive trade nation. Like they had mainland holdings, but they were pretty much just all islands because their mainland was kind of garbage. They were less raidy, less frozen Vikings with a lot more slavery. Funnily enough, everyone associates the Vikings with like slavery and things like that, but the Greeks are so much worse. Anyway, moving on. I got off. I don't even know what topic I was on. Anyway, let's
also allowed trade to flow through it without the worry of attack and plundering. After the Roman Empire had fully collapsed due to invaders and internal pressures, Venice remained a prosperous center of trade. Even as all of Europe fell into the medieval period, Venice commanded trade throughout the Mediterranean. Soon, the Republic of Venice was established, and this small city came to control not only the trade, but also territories throughout the Mediterranean. At its territorial maximum, the Venetian trade empire owned or controlled a large part of the Po Valley in Italy and territories throughout the Adriatic all the way to Greece. Here, they controlled the entire lower half, called the Peloponnesus, as well as Attica, where Athens is. They also controlled the Greek islands like Crete and Cyprus, as well as most of the smaller ones as well. The Venetian holdings even went as far as Turkey and Crimea. Venetians started off in the salt trade, as the surrounding lagoon was shallow and flat, creating the optimal conditions for salt works. Quickly, the city was extracting salt from the ocean and exporting it to the region into the Po Valley and beyond. By the 13th century, Venice had reached its economic peak and had expanded to command the spice trade from India through Arabia to Europe, becoming the major port of entry for spices into the continent. Venice had become so powerful that it made and held exclusive trade agreements along all of its trade routes, making it nearly impossible for anyone else to bring spices into Europe. In order to open up a spice trade of their own, nations like Spain and Portugal needed to seek out much longer ways of getting to India that weren't controlled by Venice. Usually they looked
That's an interesting way to take that. They didn't go around because of Venice. They did that because of the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Turks, unlike the Mamluks or the Mongols before them, or the Seljuks before them, or the Byzantines, no, not the Byzantines, the Abbasids, or the caliphs of Islam, and then the Byzantines before them, the Turks were very, very hostile when it came to allowing trade. So it is true Venice controlled most of the trade notes through that via monopoly. But the reason why we went around and started trying to explore different trade routes is because the Ottoman Turks, unlike everyone else who tried to make equitable deals, the Ottoman Turks jacked the prices up beyond all rational belief. The Ottoman Turks, because they knew they had a stranglehold, pretty much, for lack of a better term, strangled the fuck out of the spice trade. So, which then made Venice have to crank up the prices. Venice, Genoa, Pisa, all the other different merchant republics, because they neglected to mention them. They had to jack up their prices in regards to actually getting the spice and silk and porcelain and everything else that would go along the Silk Road and throughout the Indian Ocean trade routes. Since not the Mamluks got slaughtered by the Turks. The Turks jacked up all the prices, which then made the Venetian and all the other trading republics jack up all the prices, which then made countries like Spain, Portugal, England, the Netherlands, later in history, try to find ways to make money and try to actually get around the obscene prices that were now put on things that were already obscenely priced. Like, Venice was already overtaxing the shit out of the different trade goods. But once the Turks came along, and with their, frankly, terrible way of dealing with trade, it forced everyone else to go around the Turks. Frankly, I don't have particularly high opinion of the Turks. The Turks weren't very good rulers. The Turks were good conquerors. The Turks weren't very good rulers. They took other people's... They took other nations, like, building blocks, but didn't really build upon it and kind of made everything weaker. The Turks weren't very able rulers. They just they poorly copied the Byzantine ruling style, and they tried to poorly cobble together the Abbasids or the Caliphs' ruling style and the Byzantines' ruling style, even though the Abbasids based their ruling style off of the Byzantines, which the Byzantines were the Eastern Romans. But they didn't do it very well. So the Ottoman Turks very, very rapidly, after they ran out of the 5, 6, 7 good rulers they had, they pretty much tanked their country and everything in it. That's one of the major reasons why you see the Middle East being so poor. Everyone blames modern day, like what is that treaty? I can't remember it now. The treaty between France and Britain after World War I to split up the Middle East, and that definitely didn't have any help. But the Turks were horrific rulers. They drained areas of their resources, and just completely and utterly mismanaged their entire empire. They were like the Spanish of the East. The Spanish were horrible rulers too. They completely mismanaged everything, and it's one of the major reasons you see the Middle East being so poor, because the Ottomans had... It wasn't even a centralized system. It was this weird mishmash. Anyway, I'm completely off topic. I really don't like how the Ottomans ruled. They damaged pretty much every country they ruled. They damaged them severely. And that's saying something, because a lot of conquerors damage a lot of different things. But the Ottomans severely damaged pretty much every country they ruled. Spain was arguably worse, but that's a different topic for conversation. Let's move on.
For this route on boats, an endeavor which eventually resulted in the European discovery of the Americas. Essentially, the Republic of Venice had become as economically powerful as an entire European nation, and the city of Venice was at the center of it. The enormous amount of wealth that entered the city through this trade is what allowed it to grow and beautify, giving us the spectacular city we know today. Ironically, nowadays, because of its architecture and beauty, the city that was built to keep outsiders, out does the exact opposite and attracts millions of outsiders each year, now in the form of tourists. So many tourists. Even still, Venice was an amazing city to visit, and a real lesson on how giving refugees a safe place to live can benefit everyone and create an economic boon for an area. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like travel videos,
That's an interesting last point. Okay, I wouldn't say that this Venice shows that giving refugees an area to live in shows that particular thing, because all Venice shows is that finding a good location that most other people wouldn't claim to be a good location to set up a city, and then through hard work and frankly luck can turn yourself into a massive nation state. That doesn't really have any bearing on refugees. Anyway, I'm not going to try to touch that, and I'm not... Well, fuck it, I don't care. This is my channel. I'm personally for refugees. I'm Canadian. Canada's based off of refugees and screwing over natives. Hopefully we turn down that last bit and crank up the first bit. But I don't think that point really fits with Venice's story. Anyway, alright, that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Is he gonna do an ad?
like this, go over to my Patreon where I'm working on a travel budget for this channel to let me go out and do more videos like this. A special thanks to my patrons who already contributed. The trip where I learned all this was made possible by you guys. Of course, subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, and maybe check out the other video I made about Europe so far. The link should be somewhere on screen. I'll be back soon with another one. Thanks.
Cool. That was an amazing video. I really liked it. Where's my thing? Go subscribe to Atlas Pro. Go like his video. Go join his Patreon. He deserves all the love, happiness, and everything else. He's the one doing the actual work. I'm just some guy reacting to shit. If you liked my reaction to this, and frankly it was less of a reaction, more obscene ramblings about things I find amusing in a historical context, give me a like, I guess, or give me a dislike. I don't really care. But yeah, tell me what I did wrong in the comments down below, or just dislike it. I don't really give a shit what you do. Apart from that, I've been me, you've been you. Love, butts, and happiness, and all that other good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one, and yeah, bye.